Hey friends, it's Corey from Hey Let's Make Stuff. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to cut acrylic with a diode laser. I have several diode lasers, including my Glowforge Spark and my Glowforge Aura, and one of the questions I get most often is what kind of acrylic can I cut on these machines? And I'm really glad that people are asking those questions because there are some limitations to cutting acrylic on a diode laser. Acrylic is a popular material to cut on a laser. It comes in just about any solid color you could dream up. There are also amazing patterns and other styles. It can be fully opaque or all the way translucent, and so it really is a very versatile material that you can craft with your laser. Your machine will direct its laser beam right at the material, and it gets hot enough to basically evaporate some of that material and cut it. But like I said, not all acrylic can be cut with a diode laser. So let's talk a little bit more about diode lasers. Diode lasers are a more economical and longer lasting laser option than something like a CO2 or fiber laser. Because diode lasers aren't as expensive to make, we can get these great little craft lasers. So these are perfect lasers if you are just getting your feet wet in laser crafting. I'm not going to go into how a diode laser is made and how it produces the beam, but the thing you really need to know is that the beam itself is on the visible light spectrum. So it's somewhere in the blue spectrum. And because it's in that visible light spectrum, it does sort of limit some of the things you can cut. A CO2 laser or a fiber laser are on the infrared end of the spectrum. So they are off that visible light spectrum, and because of that, they can actually cut more materials. So let's talk about what types of acrylic a diode laser can cut. So again, we're talking about the Glowforge Spark or the Glowforge Aura. I want to start with the acrylic that it can't cut, and then we will get into what it can cut. To start, your diode laser cannot cut clear acrylic. It can sort of engrave it badly. It basically sort of melts the top layer. It also left some really ugly charring here, but overall clear is not possible. And that is because we are on that visible light spectrum. So if you are looking through a clear piece of acrylic, you can see everything on the other side. And that's because all of the colors of light are basically filtering through the clear acrylic. The blue light from a diode is part of that spectrum. So basically the laser is going straight through. It does sort of melt it just a bit, but overall, this is definitely not something that you're gonna be able to cut with a diode laser. You may see people out there trying to give hacks or tips and tricks, but basically I've never really seen anybody do it successfully. You might be able to, with a much more high-powered diode laser, get through the material and then sort of pop it out, but your edges are gonna look terrible, nothing's gonna be smooth, it's gonna look all melty. So this is really just not a sustainable way to cut clear acrylic. Another one I get a lot is mirrored acrylic. So this is a piece of mirrored acrylic, and it functions basically like the clear acrylic. It's sort of engraved the front. It engraved it actually much nicer than the clear acrylic, so you may want to use this for engraving. That would probably work with your diode laser, but overall it just did not cut through. You can see on the back I don't have any image here from that star trying to cut through, so mirrored acrylic is also a no-go. Then we have blue acrylic, which is sort of somewhere in between. So this is a piece of teal acrylic. I got this off Etsy a few years ago to cut with my big CO2 laser. It cuts beautifully on that machine, but I tried cutting my star out here and it just didn't work. I actually had it at a fairly high setting and a fairly slow speed, thinking I might be able to get through it, and it didn't even make a mark on the back. It was just not going to get through this color. And that again is because that laser beam is blue. So with blue colors, a lot of times that laser beam will reflect off and not actually cut your material. And that applies to most blue, but not all blue. So here I have a star that I cut out using Glowforge's Teal Eco Thin Acrylic. This cut really beautifully on my machine, and guys, it's blue. I don't really understand the science between what they did to be able to make this cut. I think part of it is that the pigments in here are probably not the same blue as the laser, so it was able to absorb that laser a little bit more and evaporate the material to create the cut. But overall, this Eco Thin Acrylic is actually a really good option if you're looking for this sort of tealy blue color. I also have this very light blue color. This was from Houston Acrylic, and it cut really nicely. I will say that this is a little bit thicker than the Eco Thin Acrylic, and so it took more passes. And it's very hard to see in this video, but you can tell sort of on the edge. It's just not quite as smooth as it would be had it had fewer passes, but overall I am really thrilled that I was able to cut this light blue. So aside from the clear and other translucent colors, mirrored and blue, you should be able to cut most acrylic on your diode laser. Will you be able to cut everything? Probably not. You're gonna have to do a lot of testing. But if you have an opaque color, so a color that is not see-through, there is a good chance that you're gonna be able to cut it on the diode. You're just gonna have to do a lot of testing. As of the filming of this video, Glowforge makes 6 different colors of their Eco Thin Acrylic. So we have black, We have that blue that I mentioned before. We have a nice red. We have a very deep sort of purpley dark blue color. We have green, and we have orange. Because these are proof grade materials, Glowforge automatically dials in the settings for these, and every one of them cut perfectly on the first try for me. And then I have a few other options. So when I was sourcing acrylic just to be used with different projects that I was making, of course I picked colors that I thought would go really well with my brand. So I don't have every color of the rainbow here just because there is just no need for me to have a bunch of purple acrylic around because I don't use it very often. But I was really impressed with the cuts that I got out of these non-proof grade materials. So let's take a look. The first 4 that I have here are from Houston Acrylic, and I highly recommend their site. They actually have a whole section on their site for acrylic that they have test cut with a diode laser, and they give you the settings. So you know that it should work in your diode laser. So I have a really bright yellow that I really like. I have that blue that I mentioned before, and then I've got kind of a coral pink and a more pinky pink. Overall, these cut beautifully using the settings that they gave me on the website. And then I have these 2 other colors that I bought on Etsy years ago when I first got my laser. And I did have to play around with the settings a little bit, but I was able to cut them and I feel like they look really great. We have this like slightly darker yellow and this nice bright sort of magenta pink. And if you look in the overhead view here, you'll see that if I line them up in rainbow order, I do have a wide range of colors that I can cut using that diode laser. I can't cut that clear, I can't cut that mirrored, and I can't cut some blue, but overall, this is a wide range of colors, and there are so many more than this that I just didn't have to test. So how do you test acrylic on your machine? Basically, you're gonna wanna put your piece of acrylic in the machine, and then you're gonna wanna find a material that is very similar. So one good place to look, like I said, is Houston Acrylics. They have a lot of different colors, so you can go on there, try and figure out, a color that's kind of close and try with their settings. If you find that something is not cutting through, you can try slowing down the speed and upping the power. At some point, it really starts to melt that acrylic and you can tell that it's probably not gonna work, but you can adjust things. You can add more passes as well. There is a lot of testing that you can do with something like a simple star shape, just to see if the acrylic that you have might cut in your diode laser. And then I want to mention masking really quickly. So masking is basically a material that you put on top of your acrylic before you cut it. Glowforge materials come pre-masked, those Houston acrylic materials come pre-masked, a lot of laser materials come pre-masked these days. I did leave that masking on when I was doing all of my tests and all of my cutting. So I know somebody's going to ask, well, if I put the masking on the clear, is it going to work? No, this was masked, I just took it off so you could actually see the results. I do highly recommend that you mask your laser projects. I do have a video all about laser masking, which I will go ahead and link. This video was all about cutting acrylic on a diode laser, and you might be asking about engraving as well. So you can engrave acrylic using a diode laser. I would pretty much stick to the colors that actually cut as well, because I don't really know what you might want to engrave that you wouldn't also want to cut. Normally you're going to say engrave a name on something and then you're going to cut around the edge of the name to make a keychain or whatever. I feel like there are very few instances where you're going to want to engrave without any cutting. That being said, if you go over to Amazon and maybe you can find some mirrored acrylic ornaments, you can engrave on those, and that might be a good option even though you can't cut. If you really want to get into cutting acrylic and you want to be able to cut these other colors that you can't cut with a diode laser, you're going to want to look at a CO2 laser like the Glowforge Plus or the Glowforge Pro. I have the Glowforge Pro and I absolutely love it. I use it all the time. It is definitely my favorite machine because it can do so much. However, it is magnitudes more expensive than something like the Glowforge Spark. So if you're just looking to get into laser crafting at a lower price point, know that you can't cut every color of acrylic, but you can still make a lot of projects out of this material, and you can do that at a much lower price than you could if you were going to get the Plus or the Pro. I hope you found this video on cutting acrylic with your diode laser helpful. If you have any questions or you want some help troubleshooting a material, please leave me a comment. Follow my channel for more laser, sublimation, and Cricut content. I'll see you next time.